Kindly, luminous beings, guardians of this Zoom space, we're here in love and peace and ask you for your hospitality, blessings, and protections, including protections for all associated technology and communications. And so let it be.
Thank you, Ali. And Melanie?
I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully. Welcome, everyone. I'm not quite sure what you're expecting, but I decided, rather than talking about modern house protections, which we will go into, I was going to really look at where all this came from and then work it forward so you'd understand. I'm a house healer. Dawn, who lives in Canada, and myself, I live in Southern Ireland. We prefer calling it harmonizing than healing, because we're harmonizing energies. And as dowsers, you'd understand that. So we're finding detrimental energies, whether it's ghosts or ley lines or whatever, and we will harmonize that in our home. So it's a matter of actually finding that balance. Houses is something we all have in common. We all live in a house, possibly. My sister lives in a house. And houses are actually, I'll put my glass on for a second. Houses are fascinating, and I dealt with them all over the world. We're in relationship with our homes as much as with the people we share them with. And I'm an animist as a pagan druid. I see everything having consciousness and agency, and our homes definitely do. I've had some very interesting experiences with houses, and often our houses choose us rather than us choosing them. We came on a honeymoon to Ireland, 1992, and ended up coming home with a farm. We weren't trying. It all happened rather strangely. So sometimes the house decides that you're the person that needs to live there. So that's something that is, that relational thing, I think, is very important with the house, because often our physical, emotional, and our spiritual anchor in this world as well. Refer to people being homely or homeless. It's a very big thing for us as human beings. A home's important, whether it's on wheels, whether it's a 2 up, 2 down, or a sprawling mansion. It's the same for everyone. We all care about our homes. And in the past, people used to spend an awful lot of time at home, mainly because they worked the land, or the woman was working the house, and might have been making cheese or something. So people were very much more in their houses before, when all this is taking place. And so even if somebody worked away, they wouldn't work very far. They didn't travel like we do. So that's something very different that we do now. And we don't spend as much time on our home as we used to do. We're often out at work or out enjoying ourselves or at education. So we're away from our homes an awful lot more than we used to be. And that brings its own problems as well. Lockdown changed an awful lot, as you'll all know, for people, good or ill, and now a lot more people are working from home. Like myself, I'm a house healer that works from home remotely, which is wonderful. And we have far more stuff than people had in the old days. I'm listening to an audio book about cunning folk at the moment, and how very little physical objects and clothing that these people had, but we have a vast amount of belongings and things. And I mean, books, don't even ask me about my books. And we have far more than our parents or our grandparents, which brings with it its own responsibility. We now have all this stuff that we are responsible for, and we're having to worry about insurance and locks and security cameras and burglar alarms. And if you have a smart home, you can even have an AI control your whole home, which I think is a terrifying idea. So not so much today. I'm going to look more at what people did in the past and why they did it. And we call this magical thinking. Now, to say, no flicking and switching of wands needed, but it's our way of looking at things in a slightly different angle. Now, as the dowsers, we're already doing that. We already look at the bigger picture, if you like. But I think it's important to kind of be aware that this is what people did. It's not necessarily what we need to do today, but there's ideas, there's concepts about understanding the house as a living creature or a living animistic being. So I just... how do we know? How do we know what people did? So a building deposit is an object deliberately concealed in or under a building. We find them. I don't if anybody's ever found anything in their house, something strange. I know Kate has lots of interesting things. Kate Smart in her house, she was telling me, so I'd love to find out what she's found. But we have been discovering these far back as Neolithic times. They could be animals, bones, coins, Stone Age tools, everyday household objects. In Ireland, I know a lady who had a thatched roof, and she had a thatch replaced, and they found a cat curled up in a very odd position in her roof, in her thatch. Another one found loads of money, which was rather nice. It used to be an old post office, and she had a big bag of money, which was rather nice. You don't often find that very often, but they were both delighted. Our place used to be thatched, but sadly it wasn't thatched when we bought it. So it was an interesting place to put things. But we are very linear about how we things, but in the old days, houses were something that you actually could deposit things. Most were concerned around floors, around doorways and windows. Now, some of the things that you can see here are found objects. And the little bottle with all the pins is actually a Victorian olive oil bottle that they repurposed and made into witch bottle. So recycling isn't new. I just think that's wonderful. And so we'll move on and have a look. If you look at the house as an actual structure, we all live in some form of house, and this is just an example of, but the most important things in a house are where it's actually under threat. Now, your front door, everybody has a front door or a door. Actually, in Ireland, everyone comes in the back door, which is really strange. Only the priest comes in the front door. But technically speaking, the front door is your threshold. It's your liminal space. And if you were going to protect anything, your front door would probably be the most important. And as you can see here in the picture, you could have something under the threshold, you could have something above the door, or you could have something on the door or inside the door. And a lot of people, we find all sorts of strange things in people's houses when we're house healing, and the front door is the most important, I feel, anyway. Excuse me. And so we'll look at a few things later on that people might have used on their door. And that is your first port of call. Now, our house only had a front door. It didn't have a back door. It's 150 plus years old stone cottage, and there was only one way in and one way out. So when we decided to knock a window through and make another door for a fire escape, we actually incorporated loads of things in the wall. So we've got protections in our wall where we took the wall down. So that's something you can do if you're doing an extension or you were opening up the space for some reason. So just something to think about if you wanted to incorporate something protective into your building. The other important place I've always felt is the chimney. The chimneys are always completely open in the old houses, and the chimney sweep might go down, or it might go up, and Father Christmas might come down, but it was a completely open void. And so anything could come down, including witches, which they were convinced were going to come down their chimneys. So the chimney was a place that was often very, very protected. Now, I know Jo has one of my corn dollies over her chimney, her fireplace, which is traditionally where you put something to protect it. But the chimney also had a little area halfway up, which is like a little pocket or a shelf, smoke shelf. Quite often you'd find things in there. I've been into houses where there's been things protected inside the chimney itself. So on it, around it, and above it, all those places are places you can protect your house if you were really concerned. Now, we're talking about more supernatural things or more intangible things than people climbing down your chimney. But the chimney was always a traditional place to put things. And so was windows. The windows and the walls were a very, very important place. We'll look at some of the things you could hang in your window that kind of deflect and protect. And I've always found the roof as well to be a very important place to protect, especially the threshold at the foundation. Now, obviously, if the house is already there, you can't do the threshold or the foundation, but we'll look at that as well. So all these things were places where traditionally these things might have been left. And you can see on the shoe of the lightning conductor, hundreds and hundreds of shoes have been found. Old shoes, sometimes just the one. Children's shoes, adults' shoes, they were used as a lure to deflect. It's almost like if you had something, your path through life is what your shoe would show. And the Egyptian ankh, if you're familiar with the ankh, was often said to be a sandal, and that showed your path through life. So we're not 100% sure why they used shoes, but they're a very personal thing. So you'd find them all over the place. And as if you look at the actual locations, they're often in the basement. They could be absolutely anywhere. Sometimes in the ceiling, but in the attic. But they're put in quite specific places. So there was obviously a reason that they thought that that would be a good thing. But it's almost like because it had your energy, then that whatever was meaning you harm would actually be drawn to that. So it's something that you could do if you wanted to. If you wanted to pop something into the attic to keep away any spiritual kind of nasties. I'm just trying to think this one. Carry on next one. So the house is a place of possibilities. The other thing is coins. Coins are fascinating. This one was found 1865, and the brickwork above the front door of a folk museum, and they were hidden in walls of houses, placed under doorsteps to bring good luck, and all sorts of different places. My friend Rita over here in Galway, they had a house right next to the church, funnily enough, and she said that they decided to build an extension. So they ripped up the floor, and it wasn't a particularly old house, and they found lots of silver coins in the corners. And when she asked one of the old lads up the road, he said, "Oh, that's for good luck, don't touch them. That's to pay the corners." So when she built the extension, because she said, "What should I do?" I said, "Well, put more silver coins down." So she put more coins into the corners of her new foundation, and she said they've never had any trouble. They were all warned that, you know, it was going to be bad luck and she shouldn't do this. But it's almost like you're pacifying something, whether it's psychological or whether it's other. We don't really know. But she said it made her feel better. She's almost like giving, because she's breaking new ground. So she was giving the land a gift. So, and coins are something that you can really do things with. And Ralph Merrifield, he's a wonderful, wonderful writer. I've got his lovely books, and Ireland was very much a case of where they used to use the coins to if you dug up a coin, quite often it would tell you the date the building was put in as well. So you'd find a coin for that date. So if you were doing now, you'd find a brand new coin and put in your corner. So you know that that was the date that that building or that extension was built. But it was very much a case of that structure was almost a gift for a gift, if you like. And also, another one was to ensure financial stability, which is very important. If you put money in there, it means that money would come to your house. So it's all very logical. And there's so many different Roman coins found and buried in substitutes for the foundation burials. Before they literally used to use humans or animals. So it's really nice to say that they're using coins instead of that. I'm sure there's an awful lot of animals that are glad they're doing that now. But with coins, it's something that everyone can do. You can make it it doesn't even have to look very strange if you were to do that in your own house. But I thought they were a wonderful way to do that. Surrendering something for the spirits and paying for what you're asking when you're breaking the ground. This is where we live. You can see what's like a hay barn in the distance in the first picture. And we bought this house from 92. And the hay barn was rickety, but it's held up by pure will and rust, I think, by the time we decided to move it. And so we thought we'd really like to build a studio, which is what I'm sitting at the moment. My husband's an artist and I'm a craft worker, so we needed more space. And because we live in Ireland, and we also have the blessing of having a fairy fort above us, where the on-she, the fairies live. And we were warned when we first bought the house, it was haunted by the fairies. And we thought, yeah, sure. You think we're gullible because we're English, but they were deadly serious. They really were fairies. And I would actually have people come up to me. I'd be at the local post office going to post a letter, and an old farmer would come up and say, "Are you still in the Broderick's place then?" And I'd say, "Yes." And he said, "Have you seen anything? Have you found the fairies yet?" The place has a reputation, apparently, for the on-she, or the two down on. And they come down our drive, round to the front of my cottage, and then straight out into the main field with these two very old hawthorn trees. And we were told never to cut them down and never to damage them and never to block the path. We had all this, which is, it's all, in Ireland, they call that pishogues. It's a bit like superstitions. But everyone was very, very adamant that we didn't do anything. Our house hadn't been lived in for over 40 years. It was empty. It was almost a shell. They had a cow in the kitchen. There was no water, no electricity, nothing. So it had been there a long time. But the house always had this reputation. So we thought, well, okay. And they say, the big thing you say is do not ever build on the west. So guess where our hay barn was? On the west. And so we were thinking, okay, what do we do? Because it's traditionally for the on-she, that's where they'd go to the land of the ever young Tír And so we were thinking, okay, what can we do? So I spoke to a couple of people, one of which was Eddie Lenahan, who is a lovely old storyteller over here. He's very well known over here. He's just up the road. He's a lovely guy. And he said, you hammer 4 stakes in the ground, but you don't hammer them hard. You just put them in the ground very, very gently. And you mustn't kind of support them at all. And you leave them there for a week, 2 weeks, a month, depending whatever you feel. And so I dowsed, and it was a month. And so we left them. And he said, if even one of them falls over, they're saying you can't build there. And luckily, thank you, they were all upright by the end. So, as you can see, by the next week, we had our foundations first created. We took the hay barn down and we dug the foundations, not personally, I might add. And it was filthy weather. It was pouring with rain. It was dreadful. It was really dreadful weather. Even the builders were having trouble doing stuff. And so I thought, well, we really want to go out there and break the ground and leave an offering to say, is it okay? And say thank you for letting us build here as we are. And so the weather forecast was appalling, and I thought, we're going to have to go in galoshes and wetsuits. But I asked politely, and the sun came out. As you can see, the rain stopped, the sun came out. We had a whole hour of perfect weather, completely unexpectedly. So we both came out. My husband's a druid as well, and we did our little kind of ritual. We left some foundation offerings, and we blessed it. And we asked what we'd like this building to be for us when we're actually in here. And as minute we finished and we said thank you, the rain just rolled back in. It was the spookiest thing ever. So the builders started, as you can see down at the bottom, and they're very superstitious, but and they're also Steiner school. They're very open to things like this, which was good. And they soon learned to be very respectful about and good neighbours, as they call them over here. But they built the foundations, and there were no problems. And as you can see, that's our studio, which is in the picture at the bottom. So we're now upstairs, where we get from there. But it's a matter of learning the folklore if you want to do something else. If I didn't know that folklore and I hadn't asked permission, goodness knows what happened, because everyone says, oh, no. There's actually buildings here where they've actually taken half of the building off because they've gone across a ferry path. And there's all sorts of stories. Eddie Lenahan, Meeting the Other Crowd, if you ever want to look up that book, it's a fascinating book. Eddie's a really sweet guy. So it's something we even can use today. I mean, I'm sure you won't have fairies, but you might do. You might have little spirits. Horse skulls. Now, this is a really strange thing. You wouldn't really think about a horse skull as being something that you bury or something that's very important. By the way, the one in the middle, I think, is called Herbert. I think they said in the book. I thought it was rather sweet. Once horses were sacrificed to protect a territorial border, now skulls were being used to protect the border of a specific structure. So the horses as building deposits are very, very common. And this goes back to kind of Bronze Age and the Iron Age. And it's still found in parts of the world today. Often the skull is only one buried, and some it's up to 40. So it's a very, very popular thing to use. In Wales, the horse skull was buried to dispel the evil spirits. In Finland, it was buried as preventative against things. And Scotland, horse skulls were sonsi. That brings prosperity and good fortune. So that's something that people associated with a horse. Why horses, though? That's the thing. I thought this was lovely. An account from Norfolk in 1897. They watched the workmen dig the trench for a foundation, and their uncle carefully marked the centre of the site by driving in, the things covering the words, a wooden stake again. The men gathered around while the uncle uncorked a bottle with beer. Then the horse's head was placed in the bottom of the trench, but the glass of liquor from the bottle was thrown on top of it, and when the rest had been drunk, the men shoveled bricks and mortar on top of the head and explained this was an old heathen custom to drive away evil and witchcraft. Now, it's a foundation offering, and my son works in construction, and he said he's found all sorts of strange things over the years as well that people have left there. So it's something that even if they didn't understand what it was for, they still understood there was a reason to do it, which I thought was rather sweet. There's some horse skulls that they've actually been unearthed, which are fascinating. This is an island and describes 2 sites. During the 1980s, when my grand-aunt's house was being renovated, something unusual was found beneath the floor. As the flagstones were lifted, 2 large horse skulls were revealed near the centre of the room. The house had been built in the 1840s, a bit like where my house was, and the house skulls had been laid undisturbed since then. 20 years later, when working on an archaeological excavation in Portmaddock, which is Dublin, most of which dated from the 15th and 16th century, a horse skull appeared near the centre of the structure. It's charcoal from the floor deposit showed it carbon dated, which suggests it's likely to be 16th and 17th century. The discovery was followed shortly afterwards by unearthing of not one, but 8 horse skulls in a second building on the site. They were closely packed together and again had been deliberately placed when the clay floor was being thrown down. The skulls were all from stallions, the majority of which were only 15 years old at the time of death. So whether they were ritually sacrificed, I shudder to think, but it's a very common thing. And my friend Blossom is doing something very similar with France and Germany, where she lives, and looking at this as well. So I'm hoping that we can actually discuss this another time, because I'm not familiar with France or Germany. By the way, that's my horse skull, that one there. I found that in the woods walking one day with the dogs. I'm very, very proud of it. It's massive, a big horse skull. Brian Hogarth, his brilliant book, I've recommended it at the back. In 1945, a study conducted in Ireland in which almost every person surveyed knew the practice of burying horse skulls. Now that's really interesting, because when we first came here and we said we were going to dig up the old floor, though everyone said, you'll probably find a horse skull. We thought, why would we find a horse skull? Our house was one of the few houses around where they used to all meet because of no electricity. Rural electricity didn't come until 1959 here. And so nobody had electricity. And so everyone would meet in one house. And Mary and Michael, who lived in our little cottage, had no children. So there was a lot more space than most people would have had. And so that was the house where everybody came and danced and sang and played music and told stories. It was the house that everybody came to in the wintertime, especially. I've been told that by so many old chaps. And they all say, oh, you know, you're still going to be doing that. I thought, no, no. But we dug our floor expecting there to be a horse, and there was nothing. I was so disappointed. But never mind. Maybe it crumbled away. But the explanation given in many cases was that during this improved the sound when dancing, which is why they'd said this in the first place. And especially before the fire. Similarly, in Herefordshire, at an inn, at least 24 horse skulls were found screwed to the underside of the floor, where they were refuted to make the fiddle go better. So if you're ever worrying about your acoustics, there you go. Many historians have found that they use the horse skulls more for the echo and to kind of keep the sound. And renovations in a church in Elsdon, I'm sorry, this is obscured. When the church was being repaired in 1877, 3 horse skulls were discovered in a small cavity above the bells, possibly placed there for protection against lightning or to improve the acoustics, or many as an act of sanctification. They're now in a case in the church. So even the church has got them tucked away in to show people. I think it's lovely to find these wonderful, mysterious things that are hidden away. In many cultures, loud noises were used to expel evil forces. Now, I know that anyone doing house clearing would do that. They'd go around with bells and bang and drums to brighten things away. So the practical use of horse skulls as amplifiers doesn't necessarily contradict their symbolic role. Cattle skulls would have been much the same, but for some reason they only used horse. And I make baby rattles and proper rattles out of straw. And one of the reasons that I make them is because that's supposed to do the same thing. It's supposed to keep away, the sound is supposed to break up the energy. So horse skulls have been used for loads of different things. The roof is another place we'd need to look after. And anyone who's ever had a thatch roof might have one of these little finals put on. And as a corn dolly maker, I've always wanted one of these on the roof. I think they're wonderful. But I'm not sure that the one is supposed to keep witches off. I'm sure that one there isn't actually working very well, but never mind. But these are often made by the thatcher as a little extra thing on the end, because they used to believe that once they'd made the roof, and I've spoken to loads of thatchers over here who was telling me about this as well, they were worried that the witches would come and pull all the thatch back out. So if you gave them something to play with, they would leave your thatch alone. So now we know what they're up there. But I think they're absolutely beautiful. And if I still had a thatch, I'd definitely have them on my roof still. I think they're lovely. Beautiful work. Now, sorry about Ireland. I'm not concentrating on Ireland. It's just it's obviously somewhere I've got more experience. The house you can see in the picture here, I have been driving past that house for 30 years. It's on the way to Ennis. And it's never been lived in. It's just empty. There's an awful lot of empty old houses over here, which is very sad. And when we bought our house, it was just the guy was selling house-shaped piles of stone as houses, which I thought was a wonderful Irish way to sell things. And But this house has been like this for a very long time. And what's always fascinated me is the cross hanging in the glass. You can see it hasn't faded, it hasn't disintegrated. I don't quite know why. It would probably be made of rushes rather than straw. I make mine in straw. You can see some of the straw ones are mine. And they are indestructible. They'll outlive you if you look after them. They'll live forever. But the rushes used to only survive for that year usually. Then you make a fresh one. And there's lots of different types. There's lots and lots of different designs. RTE. Now at the bottom left, there's a little black image with a cross. Telephone Erin. That's basically like the BBC over here. Telephone Erin. And they used, I think it was 1960. They used the St. Brigid's cross as their symbol, like a screensaver on the television. So everybody knew. And they used that one particular design. And it's not the only one, but everyone now thinks that is the only one. There's hundreds of them, as you can see. The round one with the cross in the middle, that's from Cork. And they're all, the one with 3 is actually what you'd normally put into a barn or a shed to protect your animals. You'd make one in the house and you'd make one in your outbuildings or your stockroom. And next to the basket of I don't know if I can show you this, can I? No, it won't work here. There's one actually hammered into the rafters. I spent a lot of time demonstrating up in the National Museum here in Ireland, and I met an awful lot of other craft people that were passing through. And there was a lovely thatcher who was doing a project in the grounds of the museum. And I was chatting to him and telling him what I did, and he was showing me about the thatch. And I said about making some British crosses. And he said, "Do you find me in the houses?" Now, my next door neighbour, who lived here slightly before we did, they found a cross nailed to the roof, to the actual rafters in their house. And it was a terrible state, even worse than our place. And so they'd just taken it down. But he said he remembers seeing this thing and thinking it was really unusual. But the thatcher told me that in the past, everybody would make a St. Brigid's cross on the 31st of January. That's the day before St. Brigid's Day here, which is very, very special. It's now a bank holiday, which is wonderful. And so everybody would make one. Even the children would make a little tiny one, and they'd put it above their beds to keep away nightmares. So they had all these lovely kind of reasons to use them. Usually the wife or the husband would make the big one, like the one you can see in the door there. And the wife would make one to hang up, and she'd always make one to put in the thatch, which I didn't realise. And he said that when he goes round, because the woman would start in one part of the building, maybe the front part, and then if her daughter or daughter-in-law would take over, she might start putting hers in a different part of the building. So there were little areas, kind of little pockets of where these crosses would go up every year as a little protection. One would be burnt, the one that was hanging up in the door, so the actual holding the threshold, the liminal space of the threshold would be burnt in the range or in the fire, because they believed that that took away all the negativity. And the St. Brigid's cross was to keep away fire, fever, and famine. So fire, if you lived in a thatched building and you had sugon chairs, which were made of straw, and you had straw on the floor, and everything was very flammable. So as Brigid was also associated with fire, and she had an eternal flame that in Kildare that was supposed to have been lit for a very long time. It's only just been relit recently, which is wonderful. So they're redoing that now in Kildare, which is great. But they used to believe that she had power over the fire. So if you put a St. Brigid's cross, it would stop your house burning down. So that's always good to know. The other thing was fever. She was kind of a domestic goddess before she was a saint. And so she'd look after the house and the home and the healing. She was kind of very connected to healing. So she would also heal you if you were sick. And the famine was making sure that you'd always have enough food, because she looked after wild animals, like mostly cows and sheep and the livestock you'd have. And so those 3 things was what she'd protect you from. And there's lots of different shapes and designs. But he said when he would go into look at an old place, they say, "We'd like our thatch redone." He said he'd actually be able to count how many crosses to tell him how old the thatch was, because every single year they put one up. And then he'd also be able to tell you how many generations had lived in that house. He said it's not something that people do anymore, sadly, but he said that's why he was taught to age the thatch, by counting how many St. Brigid's crosses. I thought that was wonderful, because we're losing all this. And I used to teach this in national schools, which are like primary schools here. I'd go and get the kids to do this and take them home and send them home to do it with their grandmas and granddads. And in Ireland in 1930s, all the children, it's called the Schools Collection. You can see it's all online on ducas.ie. They sent all the children home to record the folklore of their parents, grandparents, and family. So there's beautiful hand copper kind of written beautiful little reports from children about the fairies or the banshee or something, and all this stuff is now recorded. I think Ireland's got the best folklore collection in the world, and I'm not saying because I'm not Irish. I'm from Kent, but I'm very impressed with what they've done, and they have the most amazing acts, and you can get it all online, and some of it's all being translated because a lot of it was Irish. So all this stuff is being preserved, and the children, even the 1930s, they knew that they needed to preserve this because it would disappear. So it's something I think that it's important that we don't forget that this stuff one day might be useful. But the Spiritus Cross, as I say, is a big thing in Ireland, and I must have made thousands of them. But it's a lovely thing, and anyone can make a Spiritus Cross. It's very easy to make one. You can find how to do that on the internet, or drop me a line and I'll send you the details. The other things, horseshoes. We're talking about horses again. Not all items were concealed. In fact, many were very proudly displayed, like the St. Cross. Such as a horseshoe or a horse brass, both having a long history of apoteic, I can't say apoteic, I can't even say that word now. I've got dyslexia. Apotropaic, thank you. I got dyslexia. Apotropaic use. I do apologise. Horses designing the fireplace. Because remember I said about something can come down the chimney. So they put the horseshoe in the fireplace to protect it. They put it on doors to protect them. There's even one as a little latch. I thought that was rather clever. They were for good luck. They were if you're in your front of your house. And there's some even a Croatia. They got one on the little fire kind of oven there as well. The horseshoe has been used for various things, hanging on the front of a door to ward off evil spirits, to protect the inhabitants of the home, or as a hearth. So it's something that you're supposed to find it on the ground as you were walking. You're not going to find that many thrown shoes anymore, but they're not that hard to get hold of. And I have them all over my farm. We found some really, really tiny ones, which is rather nice. So horseshoes is a really good thing. And one thing I have to be very careful of is because they're iron, and because we have the on-she, I can't put them in certain places because I would upset my good neighbours. We don't want to be doing that. But they do help. So that's a very small thing. And it's something that nobody's going to bat an eyelid if you put a horseshoe up. I do make horseshoes as well. This is what I kind of do for a living. I just thought I'd show this because the pink one was actually a commission. My friend works up in a folk park in Northern Ireland, in Tyrone, and their actual resident blacksmith, because people come to have a look and see how things were made in the old days, was a lady, and she'd just had her first baby. And so my friend said, would you make her something special? And I thought, what do I make a blacksmith? So I thought, oh, a horseshoe. And so I made a horseshoe, and I put a little kind of blessing inside. When I actually weave around, I have a little wire upside, and I put the little blessings, 3 blessings for the baby inside that. I often put them in rattles, so that when you rattle when you shake the baby rattle, then it's actually shaking all the blessings over the baby. But this was a little bit special because she was a blacksmith, and a female one, which is lovely. And in Ireland, there's a very famous old folkloric female blacksmith, which is I thought was a nice thing as well. But I'd been on a heritage event up in Roscommon, near up in Sligo, and one of the travelling people there was selling horseshoes. So I picked up a bunch of horseshoes, but he had these little tiny, tiny ones. He told me they were for goats. Now, goats have cloven foot, so that's not very likely. But I bought about half a dozen of these, and I thought, well, I'll never use them. So I used it on this, and I gave it to her, and she was delighted. And she actually said, if I ever run out, she's going to make me some more. So that's rather good. Hand forged by a lady. And there's nothing more magical than a blacksmith, trust me. And I also had one, you can see one at the bottom as well. And again, hanging up with some Brigid's cross underneath. My friend Martin, who's Dutch, he moved into a house with 2 very small babies. And all this weird stuff started happening. And he asked me to come and have a look. And I said, oh, okay, I think you've got activity. But it was of the on-she kind, and when he spoke to his neighbours, they told him that there was a fairy path there as well. It wasn't going through his house, it was going past his house, and he was very worried about them stealing his children. But I think many parents would quite happily have them steal their children when they're screaming, but never mind. But he was very keen to keep these babies safe, so I made him a little horseshoe with the protection inside again, and put the little tiny horseshoe in there to protect the babies and keep them safe, because they were very cute little babies. And so they can be incorporated into anything. The one down with the very bright green one is also for a friend of mine who keeps horses. But there's some horsehair. And here we used to have hiring fairs. I don't know if we did it in England as well, but if you wanted a job, you'd make a little kind of knot, a straw knot, and you'd go to the marketplace wherever people were meeting to be the actual people who wanted jobs would be meet in the green somewhere, and all the people that were looking to employ them would turn up, and you'd have a little twist of something that you did for a job. So if you worked with sheep, you'd have a twist of wool. If you worked with horses, you'd have a twist of the horsehair. And that would immediately be able to people say, oh, you work with horses, what is it you do? And so it would break the kind of the conversation. I used to do this with children in schools. It was hilarious what they came out with. But there was always a little thing that you can incorporate into these, as like to make it more personal. The one on the other side was for a beekeeper starting a new business, and my other friend starting a fibre business with her sheep. So I made a really bad sheep with her wool. But I like the fact that it's personal, these things. So you can personalize them and make them something that would be very special and slightly magical, let's say. Horseshoes. Horseshoes are lovely. Now, I'm not into feng shui. I'm not an experienced feng shui person at all. But I'm told they can balance the positive energy in your home and help harmonize the space. So that's a really good thing. And as well as encouraging good luck. The idea is that what you put on and around your door is what you're essentially inviting into your home. I thought that was lovely. So that's why underneath it says, bless this house and with love and luck, which I think is a lovely thing to enjoy. Lots of people would put them inside. As I said, you can have them outside or inside. And this is a little kind of subtle protection. A lot of people used to put them in their barns to keep their animals safe. So it's a very simple way you can do that. But I think a lot of people worry that it's going to draw too much attention, but I think they're rather vintage, rather nice. Okay, this is Bernard. Bernard is part of my family. Sorry, he's looking a bit mossy here. He's had a little clean up since then. He's about 2.5 foot tall. He's my guardian gargoyle. I collect gargoyles. I know other people collect frogs and pigs. I collect gargoyles. He's the biggest, and he's also the boldest. Bernard, because as you can see by his name, kindly modelling. He often models for me. He does like his picture taken. Horse brasses are a very, very interesting thing as well. I collect hundreds of them. I'm terrible. I find them fascinating, but they're good for good luck. And I also add them to the corn dollies sometime. That's actually a Devon one. I thought that would be interesting for you. And one with horses. I hunt high and low for the really magical looking ones. My friend was a twitcher, which is why they got the bird. She wanted good luck with twitching, with her bird watching. And my gargoyle is actually the spirit of place. That's where he lives. He lives on the top of a gate post and guards everywhere. And Bernard is, when we had the builders here, they were intrigued by him. And I always talk to him every day. I say good morning to him and talk to him and have a little chat with him every day. And I found all the builders doing it as well, which I thought was wonderful. So he's kind of the guardian space of our farm. But thank you, Bernard. Horseshoes again. Now, weddings are a big, big thing because not only do you have a horseshoe at a wedding, but you're going to bring it home. So horseshoes are fascinating. I've made an awful lot of horseshoes for people. And I usually put blessings inside them. I weave the blessings inside. The orange one, I've never been asked to make an orange wedding one before, but that was a very specific commission by someone. One thing that I always add to every single one is something blue. Now, you've heard about something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. And I always try and add a blue bead or a nazar, which is like it to keep away the evil eye. And that way it's a little tiny bit of protection. The one with the Celtic background there, that was a big, big wedding in for a Dublin wedding planner asked me to do. It was on Lunasar, which is like harvest time. So I made masses and masses of things for this couple from Dublin. And they had a big hand fasting. And we used lavender throughout because it was blue, and that was the theme throughout the whole thing. They even had to jump the broom. I had to find them a broom, a proper old-fashioned broom to jump, and then teach the priest how to get them to jump it. He wasn't quite sure why they were jumping the broom, but he was very cool about it. But so these are things that in the old days, on your wedding day, you were actually given a twist of straw. It was over here anyway, and I'm sure it was in England as well. Somebody would make a little something in straw. Straw is prosperity, but it's also fertility. It's a big fertility thing. So you'd be given a twist of straw on your wedding day, and then you keep it at home and you hang it over your bed when you wanted babies, and the babies would come. Trust me. My grandson, Cyrus, is actually a Kundali baby. My daughter-in-law is Indian. She's from the Punjab. and they wanted lots of babies, and nothing happened, not a thing. My poor son was devastated, and they tried for 11 years without any success, and she was mortified because obviously the time was ticking. And so I said, I can make you a cool dolly. And she was horrified because it's all witchcraft. It's not. She's cool now. She's very cool about it now, but she wasn't at first. And so I said, okay, I will make you a special one. And so I made her something very special. They hung over the bed, and I said, just practice, which they did. And they were saving up for IVF, which is very expensive. If anybody's ever tried that will know. And my poor son was dreading it because it would make it even more stressful. But he's grown up with a family of druids, so he's very open to all of this. And so I said to him, always watch your dreams. And on the morning that they were meant to go to the IVF clinic for their first appointment, and he said he dreamt that his wife was pregnant. So he said, my mum said always listen to my dreams. So he dragged her to the chemist first, and 4 tests proved that she was really, really pregnant. So they never had to do the IVF. And Cyrus is my cool dolly baby. I'm very proud of him. He's almost 12 now. It's quite scary. And I've helped several people with fertility problems, but as an ecologist, I trained in ecology. I don't think I can do that anymore with the population exploding, but I've helped several people, one of which was told that genetically she couldn't have children, and she's now on her 2nd. And I think she'd probably have a 3rd if she could. But so this is something that the corn has been famous for a long, long time, prosperity and fertility. And so it shows that, you know, whether it's psychological or not, it worked. And my daughter-in-law slightly wasn't very keen on the idea at first, but she's now delighted. So I'm glad to hear that. Horses, again, are big, interesting creatures for magic. Why would the horse brass have the power to repel the evil eye? Very good question. Firstly, its association with the horse itself, an animal that was particularly liable to the attraction of malignant forces. People would overlook it. That was very, very popular, especially if you were jealous of someone. It was popularly believed that if a horse was discovered covered in sweat in the morning, then it had been pixie-ridden. Now, I'm sure in Devon and Cornwall that's something as well with the pixies. Or hag-ridden, I mean that the pixie or the witch has stolen it and ridden it through the night. And the little illustration is the devil and a witch on a wild ride through the night. I love the old woodcuts. And the horse brasses and the evil eye have a very, very strong association. A lot of people didn't even know why they were wearing these things. Quite a few people knew that they were protect, but they didn't know what or what the actual reason anymore. Because we lose this, it becomes something that you just do because you do without actually understanding why, which I think is sad, because I think it's really nice to know why you do something as well. But the horse brasses are absolutely gorgeous, and this is I found this. I thought this was wonderful. This was Alan Gardner. You know Alan Gardner, the writer, and he, in his essay "The Voice That Thunders," records a really interesting example of a ritual concealment. That's been something tucked away as an unspecified date in the past. Mr. Gardner was sitting in a house in the I can't pronounce that, Mordell Valley. I have no. My apologies to elf people. With an elderly friend called Daffyd. I think I've got that one right. And Daffyd announced that he would like to bequeath him his beauty things, which I thought was a lovely expression, which Mr. Gardner described as junk beyond price, the objects we accumulate through our lives that are simultaneously valueless and invaluable. I have a house full of those. I'm sure many people do. As Mr. Gardner writes, Daffyd retrieved the first of his beauty things to give him. He reached up the chimney, again, here we are, and pulled down a soot-blackened set of horse brasses. They may have been made in Birmingham for tourists, but Daffyd had used them correctly as I can't even say that word, Mr. Wolf, apotropaic. I'm sorry, I'm dyslexic, I just can't work that word. Good luck insignia for a harvest offering to the earth for breaking her. I thought that was beautiful. Excuse my dyslexia. But it's in exchange for the harvest, he gave a gift, which I thought was lovely. And there are so many interesting horse brasses. I've always thought they were a beautiful thing. Cats. Now, if you're a cat lover, I apologize in advance. I'm actually allergic to cats, but I wouldn't do this to a cat even if I could. So you're quite safe. This is a really strange thing. We have found, or archaeologists have found numerous amounts. I think it's 100 of them. Mummified cats are still relatively commonly discovered. Many have been found bricked up in walls or sealed beneath floorboards or hearthstones. becoming dried or mummified over time through a natural process. Sometimes the cat is accompanied by a rat or a mouse, equally mummified. The theory is that the cat was intended to scare off vermin of either the natural or supernatural kind. Some may have been accidentally enclosed, but many of their locations, sealed in airtight spaces beneath the hearthstone, as well as their quite deliberate placement in a hunting pose, suggests that it was deliberately concealed. So this is a cat that was found in a church, and this is the Dinscale cat skeleton found under that range, or that little kind of wood stove, but it was under the hearthstone, so obviously it was much older, as you can see. And it became the custom as almost like because they felt that the cats had like a sixth sense, and that they'd be put in the walls to actually keep away physical and spiritual vermin, so your house would be safe. Now, I think it's a cruel thing to do to any animal, but there's been so many cats have been found. So like the one I mentioned in the beginning where the lady found it in her thatch. So they were often put there as a protection. One would hope when they're dead. And as you can see here, this is the place the Stag's Inn in Hastings. And not only is the cats they found, but the rats as well, as you can see. I love the fact that they've put little ceramic ones on the top there. You've got 2 rats and 2 mice as well, little kind of things on the top of that, which is rather cute. The other one here, the bottom below that, is a hotel in Sudbury. There are well over 100 dried or mummified cats on record, so there's probably a lot more we haven't found. The most common places to find these creatures are in walls, under floors, and sometimes in the roof space. Again, going back to what we said originally about where people put things. And mummified cats, there's a whole display of the ones they found in Tudor homes at this Moseley Hall Museum. And looks like they've got a witch bottle and all sorts of things there. That's fascinating. So these things are very, very common. And I do feel very sorry for the cat, though. This is what made me wonder. I'm very interested in Egyptian and Greek and myths and legends. And I've often wondered if there's a link to Bastet, who was seen as a protector of all households in Egypt, to the more recently I can't say that word. Apotropaic. I see, I've got it there. Apotropaic, I apologise. Practice of concealing mummified cats in homes in Europe. In the past, families in Egypt invited cats inside their homes, thinking that they brought with them the spirit of Bastet. They worshipped these cats because they hunted mice and snakes, another thing we don't get here, thankfully, and other pests that ruin their crops and their perishable goods. It could mean the difference between life and death, especially in places like Egypt, which was the kind of the breadbasket of that time. Bastet also safeguarded against contagious diseases and evil spirits. In all of her many roles, she was best known as the goddess of protection. So I do wonder, because one of the things they found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of was mummified cats. As you can see by the little selection there, they look very, very cartoony, but I feel very sorry for them. They would literally be sold to people as a charm. So these poor cats, and there's been literally masses of them found in Egypt. So I do wonder whether there is a connection between us mummifying cats and putting them in the walls and also Bastet. So I'll be interested to see what everybody thinks. Now, this is one of my favourite things. I am a terrible beachcomber, I warn you now. Never take me near a beach. Hagstones. I love hagstones. I find them all over. I found that my first ever dowsing pendulum was a hagstone I found on Eastbourne Beach as a child, and my aunt gave me an old shoelace, and I strung that together and learnt to do it out of a book. And I didn't do anything for years after that, but I remember that hagstone, and I found it recently. It's not different. It doesn't have the shoelace anymore, but it worked. So hagstones are like this magical natural thing. And we live very close to a place called the Burren, which is like a massive limestone area where the glaciers just scraped all the soil. It's a marvelous place. And this we found last year. We were handfasted on Bielta May Day, and we on their 32nd anniversary, my husband, knowing what I enjoy, took me to the beach to pick up hagstones. It's very romantic. And we were literally just going to go because the light was going. And I said, no, there's just one more. I know that I've got to pick up one more. And I went back and found this one. And it's 2 of the hagstone holes that have actually been where to go. And it creates this beautiful heart. And it's as beautiful as it looks. It's as real as it looks as well. It's totally natural. And so for me, that's nature giving me a gift. So that's my amulet. And that's been a very precious and special thing ever since. So that was last year, wasn't it, Rolf? Yeah. Hagstones, perfect thing anyone can use. Hagstones have amazing versatility. I actually make a lot of the knotted charms for a shop in Cork for protection. A lot of people put them up in that. They used to hang them in their houses for protection. And it's very easy to find your own hagstones. All you need is something to string them with, and you'd make knots, and you actually very carefully focus on what you're doing as you're doing the knot. Let's say you wanted protection or you wanted good health. You'd actually do that as you're doing the knot, and then you pull the knot tight, and that's a spell. Knot spells are really easy and extremely ancient and very powerful. So if you ever want to play with some hagstones, that's a perfect thing to do. People used to hang them up in their barns to protect the animals against being hag-ridden, as we've said before. You will also be able to look through them and see into the fairy world or the other world and be protected against their enchantments. That's why if you looked through it, you were protected. Keys, I know Joe has some of my keys, hagstone keys. You used to attach a hagstone to your key to protect it. So that's another thing you could put in your door or hang by your front door. It would protect you and keep the house safe. And if you are suffering from bad weather, a lovely lady who's swinging one around her head is actually doing a really old charm to protect, to dispel wind and rain and bad weather. So you'd swing one very vigorously around your head, careful not to have anyone too close, I'm sure. The bigger the better, apparently. And that would draw the good weather back. So it would keep away bad weather. So if you're having a bad day and you want some nice weather, it might be worth seeing if that works. I've never tried that one, but living in Ireland, I'm never going to be short of rain, so that's true. So hagstones are very simple to use and are very magical things. This is my old front door. It's not the same anymore. You can see more gargoyles, as you can see. There's one I made there, must be 25 years ago. It was, I think, the red, because red is protection as well. It was from an old dressing gown, and I found some on a beach, and we lived in a very, very basic house at the time. It had no windows, no doors, no electricity, no water, no sewage, nothing. It was just a concrete shell. But even then I felt I needed to protect it. So I built that a long, long time ago, and it's still in one piece. I'm surprised it hasn't disappeared. But you'll see also my gargoyles, which protect us, and I have a garlic hanging, which is another simple charm you can make, supposed to protect your house. There's also a rowan cross, which you'll see later on, and my broomstick with a Nazar on. Now, I will keep that as a protection because we live on a fairy path. My we've had 10 neighbours next door since we've been here, which is amazing. Next door, I'd love to Dows. It's got some really strange energies. But my neighbour brought her friend round one night saying that their house they needed to borrow some sheets because they'd come back and the house was really damp, and which I gave them. And I said, oh, do come in. Her mother, who was South African, took one look at the broom with the Nazar and refused to come in my door. I had no idea why. I said, it's to keep evil spirits away. She said, I'm not coming in there. I thought, well, that tells me something about you. She wouldn't come through my door. She just would not cross. I kept trying to encourage her. Nope, wouldn't have anything to do with it, which is really strange. So they do work. I don't know why it kept her away particular, but I was quite surprised at how much she reacted to it. It's a tiny little piece of glass. But hagstones, as I say, are a very easy thing to make and a very, very nice gift to someone if you wanted to give somebody with a new house or new home. They can be used for many other things as well. I quite like the bracelet and the necklace. I love the earrings. I think they're a really good idea. I'm gonna have to make some earrings with them, I think. Another one, the brown stone there is one of my first key and hagstone. I haven't attached the key at that point, but I was experimenting with how to make them. And you can just put them in a circle. You can just put them as a string of and hang them up by your door. One has a Nazar attached, another one has an Icelandic charm on there. You can add feathers. You can use your imagination. Be creative. That's the most important thing. Creativity, I think, is what is the mother of invention, as they say. The driftwood, it wouldn't look out of place in your bathroom. So you could put something in there and make it a little kind of charm. I actually have the hagstones on all my pulls, like the shower and the light switch. I have them everywhere. So people always say to me, why have you got hagstones all over your house? I just think they're lovely. I think they're beautiful. But they're also very, very protective. And have you found themselves? It's rather nice when you found it and bring it home and do something with it. These are the keys I was talking about. These are very simple keys. I got some really beautiful old-fashioned keys from Godstone in Surrey, this little curiosity shop many, many years ago. And I think I bought the whole place. The woman was delighted. But some of them can be just little kind of decorative keys, but this is just something silly with straw and a hagstone. So there's all sorts of things you could make yourself. These are very simple to do. And red or blue is traditional for protection. Red is especially protective, and blue is healing and protective as well. So you can create something of your own. You don't have to buy them. You can just make these things yourselves. But they're supposed to protect the house and bring you luck. This I thought was interesting because it's a hagstone for keeping witches away from South Devon. So you obviously had a big trouble with witches where you lived. Another device for repelling witchcraft was the hagstone. This is a fairly ordinary stone with a hole in it, found in South Devon, and it's one of many similar holed stones that appears to be employed for a variety of different purposes, which are fascinating. As well as keeping witches away, they were used for curing ailments, ranging from toothache to whooping cough to snake bite, and were meant to prevent nightmares. So it's kind of a very useful thing to have around the house. And they were known by many, many different names: holy stones, wish stones, and nightmare stones, witch riding stones. They've got hundreds of different names. They're credited with the power of protecting both people and animals against the evil spirits and dark witches. And often one hung on a key or a door shed to the cattle stalls and keeping the cattle safe, and even fastened to the bows of ships and boats to be safeguard the crew, which I thought was interesting, because also horseshoes were quite often put on the mast as well to protect the superstitions of sailors. I could talk a whole talk on just them. They have amazing superstitions. The picture you'll see, though, obviously you've got the Men-an-Tol. I remember taking a charm there. My adopted mother was very sick, so I bought something, and I'd made something while we were in Cornwall on our honeymoon. We went back in '92 on a honeymoon. That was beautiful, and we passed it the 9 times through the stone the right way and everything. And but a cleft in a tree was also considered to be really, really powerful, a natural cleft. The significance of the whole, the idea that like the healing custom of passing an ailing limb or a sick child through a tree, the logic behind it being the Hagstone demonstrates that firstly, that a perfectly ordinary natural occurring item can be imbued with this protection because of a particular physical attribute. In this case, something simple as a hole or a hole in a tree. And secondly, that the near identical items can be given such different meanings, from witch repellent to whooping cough cure. So it's really a matter of what we put on those things. It doesn't matter. I'm sure they did work. I know that the Men-an-Tol has a great reputation for healing, but I've never put a child through a cleft in a tree, and I used to work in a forest, so I've obviously missed out there. But I haven't yet to find the cleft. A lot of people would use a cross. That's a lot of people. If you were Christian, you might find that to be a great protection for your house. I made one for a lady who she wanted all the Irish colours on. Sorry about that. But over in Ireland, we use more the Celtic cross, which I think is rather pretty, actually. And that one on the big one is actually made of oats. A lady in Dublin, her father was a farmer, and he passed away before his last oats crop was actually brought in. And she's a fellow druid, and she asked me, she bought masses of this oats, and she made me a big kind of list of things she wanted me to make with them. And every single one in the family, and I think it was like 9 brothers and sisters, they all got something made of the father's last crop of oats that he never managed to bring in. So they all have these very, very kind of special things from their father's last crop, which I thought was a lovely idea. And she was delighted. So that's the most important thing. The one that you can see with the purple and that one all the way to California, it's amazing what people like. And they weren't even Irish, which I thought was rather nice. But the Celtic cross is lovely because it has the symbol of the circle as well. Anchors are an extremely magical thing. They are a cross and a horseshoe, if you like it. That's how you'd make one. But they are protection, they are anchoring, they are hope. They mean many, many, many things. And I've made an awful lot of those, as you can see. But they're good for protecting a home, especially if you wanted to put one on your bathroom or something. But it doesn't have to look to... My brother-in-law was in the Navy, so we made him one of those. My father-in-law had one. They're lovely things to have. But anchors have a lot of symbology. It's well worth looking up that. Something as simple as that can be protective as well. And my love of Egypt, I made a lot of ankhs. I've always made the one in the middle. My dear friend Victoria, who was a fellow corn dolly maker, an amazing corn dolly maker, She suddenly found she had breast cancer, which was very sad. We were going to work together. We were going to do this whole project together. She found she was very, very sick. And so I made her a special one with a golden eagle's feather. I went to a place where they had the wild, like a protected area for wild birds where they were demonstrating the birds. And I asked for a golden eagle feather, and I got that and sent that to Victoria. And she said she kept that in the hospital with her until she died, the day she died, which is very sad. I still miss Victoria. She was an amazing artist. But it was just nice to give her something because she believed that that was eternal life. And her husband still has it hanging in the house, he tells me. So all these things are symbolic. And the whole point about the ankh, like I said in the beginning with the shoes, it was considered to be like the symbol of the sandal, and that it was your path through what life. So it showed immortality and the fact that you would never really die. So an ankh, and you have the scarab, you have the scarab beetle, you have all sorts of, and the nazar. I like to put something on the symbolic as well for protection. These are very much a protection symbol. One of my favorite things to make, and I think I must make even as many as the crosses of these are rowan crosses. Now, rowan is a wonderful tree. I love the rowan tree. It's my favorite. Over here we have ash dieback, which has been very, very sad. We're losing an awful lot of our ash trees. And the hurleys, which they look a bit like hockey sticks, but they're not. They're a very, very major sport over here. The girls play camogie, the boys play hurling, and they all come. I used to work in the schools, and they come in with broken arms and broken legs and scars, and they say camogie for like 6. But it's a very ferocious game. I would watch. I would never play. But the ash was always used because it was the twist, in that they used to love that. So people are really upset over here because their traditional the hurling sticks are not going to be made anymore. But it's curious that the rowan where we live, we're up on a mountain, about 850 foot up a mountain here in Clare, and the ash trees are dying in masses, which is so sad. But all the rowan trees are suddenly taking their place. It's almost like they've taken that position, and they're mountain ash. They're not really ash, of course, but they're totally different genus. But they're a tree of protection. They're a tree that thoroughly thrives up here in the mountain, up high. And so the tradition is you never take the wood from the same tree twice. So I make it my business to go around and find a different rowan tree every single time. Excuse me, my husband's having beer. And actually use the wood from that to make the crosses. And then I find another tree, and I always give a gift. I always approach the tree, douse, and ask if it's okay. And I even ask to be shown which bits I'm allowed to take and when. And if it says no, we stop. But I always give a gift, and I collect berries, and I collect the wood and make the rowan crosses. And they've gone all over the world. I have sold them all over the place, and they are really protective. The red obviously is defense and protection. The rowan on its own is protective. And I was listening to the book on the Cunning folk this morning. I was making breakfast, and they were saying about a lady, a milkmaid. She was making butter or cheese, and they felt they'd been overlooked. And so the cunning man told her to get a piece of wood that was from a rowan tree, and that would protect her. And the next day, all the milk churned and all the cheese was made, and whatever happened stopped. There was no more problem. So it's been a very protective tree. An awful lot of people used to grow one outside their house, and that would protect the house as well. So planting a rowan tree near where you live is a very good idea. They're also great for birds. The birds absolutely love them, especially the blackbirds. And I dry the berries and use them very, very carefully. But they are so easy and simple to make. So if you wanted to make yourself a rowan cross, they're simplicity itself. But you have to go and ask nicely to the tree, I would suggest. But I find these are one of the best protections. I put them on the house, I put them on the fireplace, I put them in the windows, on the doors. They're meant to be at any place where anything could get in, and they protect it. And it's an equal armed cross. So that's the whole point. It's a very old Celtic thing, it's an equal armed cross. But rowan tree and red thread will put witches to their speed, or rowan tree and red thread leave the witches all in dread. There's lots of lovely stories about the rowan keeping things away. And the ladley worm, is it ladley worm? Up in Scotland as well, there's a lovely story about the rowan there. But the rowan wood is a most wonderful tree. I'd be recommending using some rowan wood. I've been playing, as you can see. I was trying with different things as well. So you can use your imagination. But one of the reasons the berries were so important is because you could see the natural pentagram. actually in the Rowan berry there, and each of those has that little symbol in there. So they believe that that was one of the reasons that they protected and kept things sacred. So, knotwork, a lovely thing to incorporate into your house if you want protection. One of the things about the fireplace as well, I remember reading this a while back. If anything came down your chimney, if you had a mat in front of your fireplace or your stove, if it had a kind of knotwork or intricate, complicated symbol, whatever was coming down the chimney would be so fascinated it would stay in the carpet or the rug and would not harm you. So that was an interesting thing, and that's the same theory behind this as well. That you have this. This is a Dara knot, which I think is more of a modern thing, really. Knot patterns were found incorporated into Roman floors, mosaics of the 3rd and 4th centuries. It's in Roman art. It doesn't come from Celtic times. Spread far and wide. It was found in Byzantine art, architecture, Ethiopian, Russian, Islamic art. It's a very, very widely spread art form. And the Celtic culture had used it a long time before Christianity came in. But it's still very, very Irish. Everybody seems to think but it goes back to Roman times, which I think is fascinating. And this would be the Dara knot, inspired by the roots of the oak tree, Quercus rubber, and the tree represents strength, wisdom, endurance, and resistance. So if somebody was sick, you might want to kind of like gift them this as a protection against illness or sickness. So there's lots of different things that you could use. One of the most common is the shield knot, which an awful lot of the warriors used to take into battle. Powerful symbol of security and represents an unbreakable barrier. Perfect thing to put on your front door. The symbol was often worn by warriors to keep them safe during the battle. When continuously woven threads, it symbolized eternal protection. Historically, it was believed to ward off harm and was often given to the sick to keep evil spirits at bay. Now, I don't know if many people, my aunt, well, I was brought up by an Irish family when I was adopted, and my aunt was a nurse. And she always had this incredible belt, like a nurse's belt with the beautiful silver buckle. And it had this wonderful, complicated pattern on it. And I remember as a child being fascinating and asking her why. And she said originally they believed that sickness was evil spirits. And so they'd wear the belt, and because obviously a nurse would be, somebody was laying down, the belt would be level with the patient. And so they believed as the nurse was working, the evil spirits would be fascinated by this glinting, beautiful silver buckle, and they'd be drawn into that and out of the patients. And that's why the nurses used to wear them traditionally. I don't think they do now, but I don't know whether that's true, but that's what my aunt told me. And she said you had to clean it in salt water every so often to keep the evil spirits out. She was a Scorpio in a very, very old Irish kind of like family. So she had all these wonderful stories, which I loved. So, it's a matter of drawing something away or keeping something busy, because it's one of those things like the lemon skate, the symbol of eternity, that you can keep writing. It won't ever stop. So something as simple as a throw, a cushion or a blanket with a Celtic knot on, those things can be protective as well. Use your imagination. That's the whole point. One of my favorites as well is witch balls. I do love a good witch ball. These are, as you can see, fire. Most of them are from ships, fishing floats. But the original ones were a hollow sphere of plain or straighted glass hanging in the cottage window in the 18th century to ward off evil spirits. In other words, people overlooking you and wishing you ill because you had more than they did, which is what most of it stems from, jealousy. But later often posed on top of a vase or suspended by a cord, as from the mantelpiece or rafters, for decorative effects. My cottage has one in every single window, and I'm working on the studio. I'm just going to get some more, but they are often reflective. But they're there to reflect back anything that people send you. And the one thing you have to remember about these is to keep them dusted, which is a full-time job sometimes. But you can even use a Christmas decoration as well. So something that's very, very shiny you can put in the window, or something that will reflect back the evil eye. I have a fisherman who I deal with an awful lot, who's a fellow dowser down in Cork, and I told him this, and his house is now full of them as well, because he's convinced everyone's wishing him ill. Bless him. Yeah, I'm sure they're not really, but they're very. Sailors are very superstitious, and I should imagine if you are out in the middle of the ocean and there's nobody who can save you if you fall over, or if the ship sinks, I can imagine somebody being very nervous of that. So there's all these very simple things that people can use. And it all goes back to witch balls, which I don't know if anybody's ever come across before. These are very old versions of, but the one on the top right, that actually, I think it was the Pitt Rivers. We went to the Pitt Rivers Museum, which is a fascinating place. If you've never been in Oxford, definitely worth a look. It's full of very weird and wonderful things. So I was in my element. That was handed in by a lady who said that it contained a witch and that you weren't to open it, otherwise there'd be a peck of trouble, which I thought was wonderful. I think it was like early 1900s, but this was donated to the museum, and they believed the witch was trapped within and she couldn't get out because of the reflectiveness. So the witch balls are more to protect, but that's kind of working more into a slightly different angle. But there's lots of very simple things you could do that would look very, very decorative and wouldn't do any harm. You could give somebody this as a present when they a new house or something. Whereas witch bottles are a very, very different thing. Where I said in the beginning that people would conceal clothing or shoes or umbrellas, even all sorts of very strange things in their houses as lure, this is the real kind of extreme version of. A lot of people used to believe that a witch was cursing them or overlooking them or wishing them ill. And so, I mean, this is from Ralph Merrifield's book, a complete Bellarmine witch bottle with cork, hair, nail clippings, and a felt heart with pins found in Westminster, England, dating to the 17th century. And you can see what the remains are. They've often don't open them, they x-ray them, as you can see. The witch bottle, the brown one, is called a Bellarmine. I think he was was he a bishop? And this was ones that we used to be imported in from Europe, but it had such a fierce, ugly face. They used to believe that this would be scary enough to keep things away as well. The Bellarmine would actually scare things away, and it was salt glazed. I'm a potter. I'd love to make these, but salt glazing would destroy my kiln. But I'm very tempted one day to make a little one just to make a Bellarmine. But they used all sorts of bottles, like I said in the beginning, with the Victorian recycled olive oil bottle with pins and things in. But if you thought somebody was actually doing something nasty to you, overlooking you, then you'd find nails and you'd bend them, you'd break them, or needles and pins, but you break them. You can see they're actually bent, and that was to stop them being useful. Just like in the Celts would often throw offerings into the Thames or a spring or the Rhone, and they'd be giving an offering to the other world, but they'd always break it first, so it wouldn't be ever useful. It was like it was given away, brand new, and they'd break it and then throw it to the spring or to the river gods. But you'd put pins. I actually use blackthorn because we have a massive blackthorn here, and they're very sharp and very dangerous. But you get septicemia if you're not careful. But these, anything like pins or nails or thorns, and you put a bit of hair in. I read somebody putting blood in. You never ever put your own blood in anything like this. That's too much of a close call. That's your life essence. You never ever do that in a witch bottle. Very TikTok idea. But this would be something of yours. The heart was supposed to symbolic heart. Sometimes the heart would be pierced with pins. There's all sorts of strange things. But the magic ingredients is urine, and it has to be yours. So I just warn you, if you're going to make one of these, just be prepared. And the reason, again, is it's distraction. You're using that as a lure. It's whoever is overlooking you or wishing you ill or not wishing you well, let's say, is a much nicer way of putting it. They're going to be drawn. They're going to be trying to find you, and so you are putting a piece of you. It could be your hair, your urine, whatever it is. You read all these lovely now fluffy witchy books that say, oh, you can use this, and this. No, you can't. This is the real McCoy. They're just pretty little bottles. This is what they used them for, and I find that quite annoying because I think, no, you're not actually understanding what they were there for in the first place. But they found so many of these buried underneath hearths, underneath doorsteps, in the garden. They're found all over, and they're found in America as well, as because people obviously emigrated to America and they took that tradition with them. So there's a lot of them being found in America, and they're not always the Bellarmine. Sometimes they're just recycled bottles, as you can see, but they would be buried somewhere. And I love Cunning. I love the idea of the Cunning folk. I think it's like the fairy doctors over here. We have fairy doctors in Ireland, like Cunning folk in England, and They used to do a roaring trade of this. They used to create them or tell people to create them. If you had a trouble, they'd say, "Oh, we'll make a witch bottle." And I think it was Cunning Morell, who's one of my favourite. He's a real character, and he actually got a blacksmith to craft a metal bottle, and you were supposed to lay it on the embers of your fire, so it symbolised the witch's bladder. And so you'd have all these sharp things in, and your urine and your hair and things, and you'd put it on the coals, and it would heat up. And it was supposed to drive the witch mad with pain, which is horrible. But I suppose that was what they did in those days. I won't suggest that. Don't do this at home, kids. But he had this metal one made for a customer and told him to put it on the fire, and it exploded and killed him. It was shrapnel everywhere. It just exploded. Quite often the top would shoot out, but the whole thing just exploded with the pressure. So definitely don't use a metal one. But these were found all over, and they were found in the most amazing places in London and under very, very important places. I have them, several of them I've made myself under my doorstep and my front step and all sorts of places, anywhere that anyone would come in. I used to be working away from home an awful lot. I used to teach all over the country, so I'd be gone for days. So I always used to leave something to protect my house when I was away. And strangely enough, on St. Bridget's Day, many, many years ago, we came home after doing some work, so kind of a ritual with some friends, fellow druids, and there was a dead kitten on my doorstep. Well, at the stile as you're coming to the top of the land. And beautiful little thing. And where we live, because we're in the middle of nowhere, people tend to abandon animals. We've had all sorts of things left up here. But this poor little thing, because it was freezing cold, it was very, very icy, had actually died of cold. It was very, very young, and it was solid when we found it. I was so upset. I don't like to see things die. So I was going to bury it. And I suddenly thought, I'm going to put it in I put it cuddling a witch bottle. So I actually cuddling this witch bottle under my doorstep. It was only when the builders came to do the place that they dug up and said, "What's this?" But it, it was already dead. I would never have done it to a live one. But witch bottles are very, very traditional and very fascinating as well. There's so many of these being found at the moment. And the other thing that we find a lot of is pipes, clay pipes. Now, we found loads here, but in Ireland, when you had a wake, everyone would be given tobacco and a pipe, and you'd have a little smoke of your pipe. Then you'd go outside and you'd break it and you'd throw it on the ground. So as a gardener, I have found hundreds of these little pipes, usually all broken usually. And some of them are tiny. I used to believe they were fairies. I used to believe that they're actually the fairy pipes. As you can see by that thumb there, or that finger showing how small that one is. And I found beautiful ones with like eagle's claw holding the bowl and all sorts of things. So it becomes very, very decorative. But they were all over the place. They originally come from America and first produced in Europe. The first kind of mass-produced thing, really, if you like, from Europe. But the middle of the 17th century, they were being used widely across Britain. And they're declining after World War I with the rise of cigarettes. Like the bent pins found in witch bottles, they were deliberately broken before being cast away or concealed, which was considered unlucky to leave them intact. They're often found together with other items like shoes. What I found was interesting, it was also noted that shoes were often discovered with objects of fire, such as a snuffer or a candlestick, was probably a way of inoculating your house against fire. One of the other things you find in a lot of really old houses is fire marks, as if someone's taken the candle and burnt the wall. And they believe that was their way of saying, well, it's been burnt, so it's not going to be burnt again. So they think that the actual little clay pipes were seen as that with a candlestick, and that means it would keep your house safe from fire. So it's magical thinking. It probably makes no sense today, but I just find this quite fascinating. But the pipes, you'll probably find these, and these are Tudor, and loads and loads of them in London. I found them when I worked in London. So if anyone is interested in finding out more, mostly archaeology. Some of the many, many excellent books I've used are Magical House Protection, the I'm having trouble with words tonight, Archaeology of Counter Witchcraft. And that is by Brian Hoggett. He's amazing. He's done it. There's lots of his sites down here. The Archaeology of Ritual Magic by Ralph Merrifield, who's my favourite. I think he's wonderful. And Nigel Pennick, who I actually met once, a fascinating man. Earth Harmony, Sighting and Protecting Your Home, a Practical and Spiritual Guide. So it tells you all sorts of interesting things about why houses were placed in that position or what you could do and what you shouldn't do. So this is an obsession of mine, so I apologise if it's not something everyone shares, but I thought it would be interesting to at least show what people did so that we can then, what we can decide ourselves. So I'll stop sharing. Yeah. Hello again.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Wow.
Sorry, it's my obsession. I wasn't going to click and swish, as I said, but there's lots of ideas that people have done. And I'm sure some of you have come across things in your travels or heard of things, have you?
Well, I mean, I guess the horseshoe is probably quite commonly known and understood one, but I had no idea about all of these other ones, including shoes. That's a new one.
Shoes are there's a whole museum of shoes, and they're finding them all the time, and some of them are beautiful and well preserved. But it's really odd. What you found that a lot of things I read said that quite often builders would find them, and they'd think that they were just junk, so they'd throw them away, so nobody would ever do anything with them. But my son is works in construction as a senior project manager, and he said that they find things all the time, and he's always saying, "Don't throw it away, don't throw it away. Tell my mum." But there's all sorts of strange things they find in houses, and a lot of people have found that if there's like I think there was a pub that they found a cat under the floor. Was it the fire? And they moved it, and they said, "Oh, we'll put it in a case somewhere," and suddenly the whole place was covered in straw, and they didn't have straw, but it used to be a stables next door, and the cat was to protect the pub and the stables, because maybe it was like an inn, I think, perhaps in the old days. And when they moved the cat, all this stuff kept turning up everywhere, and people say, "No, I'm not putting it there. Where did it?" And the minute they put the cat back, straw vanished. So it wanted to go back where it was. It liked where it was. So quite often they'll pull them out, and then they'll feel really bad, put them back again. There's a lot of places that a lot of stories of people that find them, take them out, and then have very bad luck, and then decide to put them back where they found them and just leave them alone. So I find that fascinating that people would do that in this modern time. But there's lots and lots of stories if you look. But has anyone ever found anything interesting in their house, I wonder?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear if anyone has any hands raised or people wanting to.
Hello, Martin. Martin. Hello, Martin.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, I didn't find it in my house, but I inherited it from grandparents.
Oh, wow.
It's another form of protection called a witch stick, which is essentially a glass walking stick, often with a barley twist along its length.
Yes, I've seen
And these are supposed to be placed above the hearth, as any witch entering your house would feel compelled to count all the twists, thus dissipating any manage that they originally intended.
Oh, that's wonderful, Martin. I've seen something like that in the Museum of Witchcraft in Boscastle.
I donated one to the museum.
Oh, maybe that's what I was looking at, because I remember seeing that there. If you've never been to Boscastle, it is brilliant, isn't it?
It's wonderful.
Yeah. My husband and I, when we first got married back in the early 90s, we went to the original one. I think it was Cecil Williamson, and it was like a Dennis Wheatley Hall of Fame. It was really, really bad, but it was fascinating. But the dioramas were a little bit odd, and but now it's a fascinating place with so much history and an amazing library as well at the back. If you can go look at the library, but people like your good self often donate things that they found, and they have an awful lot of poppets. I don't know if you're familiar with poppets.
I am. Can I still?
Yeah,
still
please
talk?
do. Yeah, please do. Sorry, John. Sorry.
The owner of the museum at the time, Graham King, was having his roof replaced. So
Yes.
rather than living in his flat, he lived in the museum. The only place he couldn't sleep was next to the poppets because they sent out such bad energies.
Yeah, I've got several of his books. He was a fan because he saved the museum when there was a flood as well, didn't he? And he saved on Boscastle when the whole place flooded down. It's a beautiful museum. It's really lovely. It's just interesting because there's so many things.
Here they come, Reeves.
Hello.
Shooting.
We have ghostly poppets. Poppets were a big thing in the old days, and I was reading a book recently, and it was by a hoodoo practitioner. I'm not into hoodoo, but I like to read different traditions, what people do, and this lady was living next door to an extremely abusive neighbor, and she was learning hoodoo, which is all very, very positive. And she said that he was playing music, he was being rude, he was throwing trash in her yard, as they say in America, and she was getting really annoyed. So she spoke to her mum, which is like a teacher, and said, "What shall I do?" She said, "What you do is you make a poppet that looks just like him, not too much, just similar, and then you find a tree near his house and nail it in front of it." She said, but I don't do things like that. She said, yeah, you don't do anything. You're just making a doll. She said, and just nail it there and see what happens. And she said, suddenly everything stopped. He didn't make any noise. He didn't cause any trouble. Then he came round after 3 days and begged her to take it down because she'd cursed him. She hadn't done anything. It was just the fact that he thought she had done something. Because most people, but we're not allowed to do things like that. We're not allowed to do anything that harms. But she said it was enough for him to think that he was being kind of like overlooked. And so she took it down and she never had any trouble from any. So I thought it was a very, very clever psychological trick, worthy of someone like Terry Pratchett, I think, more like. But we got any Terry Pratchett fans? Yay! Terry's amazing. But does anyone else have a found? Thank you very much, Martin. That's fascinating. Nice to think I've even looked at your barley twist. That's wonderful. Did you see the glass knitting needles in there as well?
Yes, there are a lot of glass objects. Can I actually ask a question if nobody else is queuing up?
Please, please.
This is always controversial. Horseshoes. They say, I have seen it said, they have to be placed upright. Otherwise, if you place them down, all your luck runs out. Have you come across any arguments to
Yes, I make lots of little horseshoes, tiny ones, big ones. I sell them to museums and things. And I always put the folklore. I love the folklore. So my things are always covered in the folklore. And a lot of the people, it depends where you are in the country. Some people say it's fine to go down. Some people only have them up. But my best kind of friend I do a lot of craft work with, Mark, he's a blacksmith. And he said traditionally, the only person that could put it down was the blacksmith because he'd created it, and it would pour all the goodness and the magic back onto his forge, which I thought was a lovely solution to it. So I don't think it really matters, but I've always kept mine upright. It holds the luck, whereas he said that means that it would flow onto his forge so he can make even more, because the blacksmith would be controlling earth, air, fire, and water. So they were always considered to be very magical, and water from their forge was considered to be extremely, really powerful as well. So I've always liked that idea. So, but I think it's what you believe as well. But which way do you have it, upright or down?
I would have it upright.
Me too. Me too. It's very much symbolic of the moon as well in some traditions. So thank you. It's really nice. I'm glad you've seen Boscastle. I love Boscastle. It's one of my favourite places to go. My husband has to drag me kicking and screaming out of that place when we leave.
It's not everywhere you find a witches museum in the high street, though, is it? To be
You
fair.
would be surprised. My husband went to Iceland on a course, and they have a witchcraft museum in Iceland, tiny little one. And where else should I say? There's one in Scotland now as well. Graham Gardner, I was telling him about it. He went there and said hello to the guy because he's very fascinated as well. So Graham was there, and there's quite a few now. They're popping up all over the place. So can't keep a good witch down. But it's nice because it preserves all that folklore and history, and it's not all negative. Some of it's really positive. There's some really lovely things. So, but it's like with saying the collection with the children over here in the 1930s. If it's not collected and kept, it vanishes forever, and we've lost all that history, that social history, and maybe something that will actually be useful in the future. Anybody else got a question?
I've got a question. If anyone else has questions, please raise their hand. When we've been listening to these stories of how people put in magical protections, why they chose particular items, there was quite a lot of, I guess, what would have been quite fearful anti-witch, because there was a lot of propaganda, there was a lot of criminalization, dehumanization of practicing magic people. And of course, some people could have been doing hexes or, not nice stuff. I can understand the fear there of that, the unseen and the sort of controlling aspects of some, people's intentions behind things. How do you suggest, Melanie, that because we've got a new vista now, haven't we? And, witchcraft has thankfully been decriminalized, and there's a lot of books on, traditional shamanic practices, traditional sort of witchcraft practices, people doing things for good, for support. So how do we look now where we are? What are we protecting against? because I don't personally feel it's witchcraft. You
No,
know.
it's not. No. Any modern practitioner, I mean, I'm a druid rather than a witch, but we don't. It's not something you do because we believe that, you know, what you send out comes back.
Yeah.
I mean, Wiccans believe it comes back threefold, which is definitely not going to do anything. A lot of the traditional stuff that went on was actually the church. The church read Latin, and I was listening today about all these people that were actually going to the church for charms and things. And there's an awful lot of people that practice this kind of thing. Cunning folk, anyone could be a cunning folk. We have a few fairy doctors around it this way as well. But people, it's almost things that they can't control. It's usually bad luck or lack of finances, or it's something that they felt that somebody's overlooking them, somebody's jealous, somebody wishes them ill. The evil eye is all over the world. You go anywhere like Greece or Morocco, it's everywhere. Turkey, they even have them in the schools. It's wonderful. But people, and I've had an awful lot of people, even in Ireland, tell me stories about people being overlooked and people being wished ill. So it's not just witches, and you know, maybe there were witches, but they weren't organised. They were just people doing what they did. But and I know Pete and I've got a lovely lady asking a question there. Sorry, hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Maya, is it?
Mariah.
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 Mariah, I can see. I've got my glasses on. Sorry, Mariah. Hello, Mariah.
I'm curious about energies, really. And you know, you work in house clearing, and I know myself that certain objects have an energy with them. And you know, when I douse things, I'll ask about the type of energy and how far back it goes and all the rest of it. I was just wondering, these objects, if you're in a house and you're clearing it, um, can you nullify its energy, or can harmonize it, as you say?
Harmonize it. Yeah. I've had some
How
very
does that?
interesting
How
objects
do
like
you
that.
actually work that? I was just
Depends
curious.
what it is. I mean, a lot of things are we call them power objects.
Mm.
That actually have it can be something as simple as a teddy bear made in a sweatshop by someone who's really
Mm.
depressed in a third
Mm.
world, and
Mm.
that energy's gone into that teddy bear. I mean, it
Yeah,
can be
yeah, I
really,
understand that
yeah,
concept.
it's not evil or spite sometimes. It's just desperation or fear. All those things can be attached to that. Buying things in a secondhand shop, buying things in an antique shop, clear them before they come in your house.
Mm.
And whatever you do to clear that, I mean, Raymond Grace does the twisting anti-clockwise until things come, or you could bless them. I had a very interesting experience with a lady down in Killaloe, which is very far away from me. She asked me to come and clear something in her house. She said there was something in the attic. It wasn't anything terrible. It was actually something. There are things that live in void spaces, little kind of energies. They're a bit like kind of psychic spiders. They don't do any harm. But all her teenage daughters, it was like a roof space, like triangular roof space, and there was a little hatch, and they were throwing all their junk in there. And this thing was getting really annoyed because it was full of old shoes and clothes and handbags and things. And so I had to get them to take it all out, and all the stuff stopped immediately. So that was just something in the energy. But when walking around her house and clearing it, we went into her bathroom and to do each room, and there was the most beautiful glass blue bottle, and it was from Morocco, and it was when you stay in a hotel, not so much now, but in the old days, you used to get a little bottle of shampoo and a little bottle of hair, this big thing. But this was what in Morocco that was in the bathroom. This is your kind of hair shampoo or your hand uh, cream. And she fell in love with this little bottle, and she said, "Could I keep it?" And the man said, "Oh yeah, yeah, it's got hundreds of them. Please take it." So she took this as a memento from a holiday with this boyfriend she had. The boyfriend never ever let her come to his house ever. It was always, "I'll come to you," which would have made me very suspicious. I don't know about you. And he was into magical things, not nice magical things, with high magic, and most of that's fine. But there's some very strange people around, especially young men. But we won't go there. And so he'd he'd gifted her this. He said, "Oh no, I've asked you can have it," and so he gave her this little bottle. And about 6 months later, she'd surprised him by turning up on his doorstep to say, "Hi, I'm here. I just thought I'd come and visit you." And he was so shocked. And she kind of walked in without kind of being, because she didn't think she thought he'd welcome her in. And there were photographs of her all over the walls that she'd never knew he'd taken. really weird angles, like he'd been following her and tracking her. He was a very strange character. And she said she freaked out, and that was the last she had to do with him. She didn't want to know anymore because he frightened her, because he was basically stalking her before they got together. And it could be very flattering, but she found it very creepy. And so, but she kept this bottle because it was so beautiful. And when I was downstairs, I said, "Where did you get that from?" It gives me the creeps. I couldn't have told you what it is about that bottle that drew my attention, but it was like brighter than everything else in the room. And she told me the story. And I said, "Right," and he gave this to you. And I said, "Do you hear much from him?" She said, "Oh, I get occasional things from him. He follows me on Facebook. He's still stalking me in different ways." So I said, "Okay, let's cleanse that, shall we?" So we did a little ritual and we cleansed it together. She was a yoga teacher, so we did what for her was more acceptable. And we cleansed it. And I said, "You can keep it. It's no problem. Just you don't want it as it is." And she phoned me up the next day. She said, "He's just phoned me and asked me what you did." So there was obviously a link. It was like a psychic link. He was actually keeping an eye on her. He knew what she was doing. And so I think she actually just destroyed it in the end, which is a shame because it was beautiful. It wasn't going to cause any problem. So sometimes you've got that psychic link with things as well with people. That was the creepiest one I've ever had, definitely. But a lot of things people pick up from secondhand shops or inherited. Somebody might give you something. Dawn Kirkham, who I work with over in Canada, she collects haunted items. It's a really strange hobby to have, but people give her things that are like cursed or that they don't want in their house, and she cleanses them and keeps them as like she has a whole kind of collection of these things. So there are an awful lot of things that people they don't even intentionally give you that could be cursed, or it could be not cursed so much as had bad energy. So it's always good as dowsers to cleanse something if you're not sure about it. So, and there's many ways of doing that. I mean, you can use water, you can use crystals, you can all sorts of things. I tend to use earth, air, fire, and water with mine. I do it on the 4 elements and cleanse it, but that's just being a druid. So, does that help?
No, yeah, it was just my thought about how ancient objects might carry interdimensional energies.
Yeah, sorry.
I was thinking on this level, yes, but when you think about things that have been, maybe put there and blessed or whatever, or had rituals done with them in the past, which may well have been done by somebody who's got that ability or
that focus,
the passages of time, and maybe on a ley line or something like that. They could
also, if something been stolen from a burial ground or something, an awful lot of people,
so have a spirit attachment or something like that. I was just curious. That was all.
There's quite a few spirit attachments we've come across.
So we do a ritual and some Arwens and things like that. And
we do a little bit more than that. It depends on what it is. It depends on the severity of the object. I mean, one of the house healers was talking about he cleared a place that used to be the Russian embassy with some other house healers, and they found an electric chair in there.
Oh God.
What would you do with that? Apparently it was taken away and he doesn't know what happened to it. But an electric chair, I mean, can you imagine the horrors that chair must have seen? But it was the KGB or something, or the Russian embassy. It was quite terrifying. And I was thinking, oh, because we were saying to Dawn, you're going to take that one home and put in your museum. I don't think so. So there's so many different places it can come from. It could be a cursed object. It could be something that was sacred to someone and that you've taken from a burial mound. Or there's an awful lot of things here people take from burial mounds and then regret it. Archaeologists often take things. I mean, you've got the monkey's paw idea as well, haven't you? That something has a curse to it. So I think it's more a fact that you'd have to really know its history, and we do an awful lot of trying to find its history before we'd actually work with it. But it's an interesting idea about interdimensional portals as well.
Well, when working in earth energies, you find that there are certain places where energies cause a portal, or energies come together, and meditating there, you can sometimes find yourself
disappearing
to journeys or something like that. Yeah,
as long as you're protected.
Well, yes, of course. I mean, do that.
It's fascinating. There's an awful lot of strange things, but obviously a lot of them are quite personal to people. So you've also got to take into account how personal that thing is to someone, especially if a grandma had given it to them and it was causing bad luck. But there are things that are haunted, we'd like to say, rather than evil. I don't believe things are evil. I think sometimes they're just not loved sometimes, or just don't want to be moved from where they come from. Something just wanted, like the cat just wants to be put back where it was. And we do tend to collect. We have so much stuff now, and we just think it's like, look at all the objects in the British Museum. That's one of the most haunted places. My friend used to work there. He said in the basement, all sorts go on, because there were all these things from different countries, from sacred temples and from places where they never have been taken. So it's a matter of the context of the object, I think. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely, fascinating question. Thank you. Darling Ali.
Thank you, Melanie. That was superb. There's so many things to have a conversation about there. I was sort of following on from Mariah's take. I'm curious about this. So we've got to. So you're a house healer, and many a house healer will say about building an extension, and how the extension might not know that it's part of the house.
Yeah, it's fragmented.
And so there are protocols to follow, and introduce make sure the spirits of place know each other and are in communication. But silver coins seem to do exactly the same thing. I just, isn't that amazing?
But this is the thing about the hagstone, it can have so many different uses.
Yeah, it's like you're gifting the land, and in gifting the land, you're also gifting the spirits of the land, and
giving a gift to the gift. Yeah. No, but the thing about Alec Gardner, he was talking about, he gave that horse brasses as a gift to thank you for breaking the soil and for his harvest. We always used to, in the old days, people used to respect the land, and they treat it as more precious than we do now with agriculture. I mean, at the moment where I live, it's very agricultural. The farmers don't get off their tractors. They don't get out their jeeps. They don't even. Some of them have been trampled by their animals because they never go near them, and so they don't have anything to do with it's all machinery. It's all petrol. Whereas in the old days, my neighbour, who's a lovely old farmer, said, he every single one of his cows he knew by name and would never ever harm him. So we've lost our connection with the land, and we've lost our belief in its sanctity, if you like, or its sacredness.
Right, sorry, I hadn't taken time into account. So that would be nowadays an extension, because we've lost our connection to the land. We therefore need a house healer to introduce the spirits of place to each other, or whatever. But that need never have happened in the old days. That You've muted yourself, Melanie, somehow.
Spirits aren't approving, obviously. Sorry. We did that with our building. And we'll have an extension at the front of our cottage, hopefully eventually. And we will do the same. We've already explained to the spirit of place. And it's going to go across the path of the Anshi. So we've already asked them permission. And the funny thing is, I've only ever had 2 times when the fairy folk have come into my cottage, and it's both. Once was because they were curious who we were. My husband and my son had gone off somewhere, and I was painting the walls, and I had the door open because it was a nice day, and I was painting the back wall, and I heard someone come in, and I knew that wasn't them because they'd gone, but they weren't back for a while. And I knew I'm completely off the road, so it's not anybody would just stumble in, and it didn't sound like a human. And my heckles went up, and I just said, I'm painting the wall, and if you want to come in, you ask permission. And out it went. And when we first bought this house, we didn't move in. We had New Age travellers break in and squat here for a while. And we were really worried about how to get them out. And so...
In the UK.
We're in the UK. Yeah. And we were over in the UK at the time, thank you all. And so I was going to write them a letter to say, you're going to have to move out. I'm sorry, because you're fine there for the moment, but we're coming soon, so you just have to leave. And because there was no lock, there's nothing. It was a very open place, and we weren't going to be fierce about it. We're just going to ask politely, sorry, we're coming, so would you mind moving out? And they refused. So I thought, I don't want to get the Garda Síochána, like police here. I don't want to get them. It gets very nasty. So I actually said to the spirit of place, I really don't want them there. They don't have permission to be there. And I got a 4-page A4 letter back from them complaining about our house being haunted.
Oh.
Literally, the place exploded. We had no electricity, we had no water, we had no sewage, we had nothing. It was a shell. And they said there was music, there was little tiny footprints everywhere, there was things going missing, there was lights and flashes. They said the house just erupted. And I might have been drugs, I don't know. I never met them. But you don't know what they were taking at the time. But I had this kind of really rude letter about how terrible my house was, and it was scaring them all, and they all left. So I've always thanked my Aunt She for removing my. I never had to come. I was going to come over and remove them, but they went all on their own. So sometimes working with the land is really important, because the land we have like an agreement. We work together. And the only other time that the Aunt She came into my house was when I'd forgotten to tell them that we were doing something with the plans. We changed something in the plans, and I walked into my bedroom, and something followed me in, and it was like really annoying. I thought, I forgot to tell you. So I had to explain, okay, I'll bring them over to you and show you what we could do before we agree on it. So we've always had this agreement with the land. We co-create the land. I know that sounds really strange, but we work with it rather than, we don't impose our will on it. We ask first, and we ask if it's convenient. And I think that's one of the things we forget. As Druids, we always try and work with the landscape. That's part of what we do. Thank you, Ali. Alex.
Thank you, Melanie.
Pleasure, darling.
Thank you, Ali. I just checked in the chat, Melanie, and Jo, who's since had to leave, she reported that she found a fox jaw in the wall of the well. So you were asking earlier if anyone had found anything. So we found them. Yeah. Yeah. And then Jen has shared that we have shells stuck on our slate windowsills and some painted over for protection, we were told. So,
wow.
Yeah.
But isn't it lovely that people use the most simplest, basic things? And it's whatever you feel protects you. I don't think you need something special. It's whatever you feel. Like Martin was saying about the horseshoe, which way up? Which way up does make sense. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, but I liked what my friend said about the blacksmithing, but it doesn't really matter, I think, as long as you imbue it with that power or that energy, and it's not malignant, as I was saying. It's we imbue things with our own energy. We're energy beings. We're working with energy all the time as Dowsers, aren't we?
And we're creating something like a talisman, aren't we, if we're putting those blessings in. And yeah, I'm curious, Melanie, if somebody's just starting out, let's say, wanting to create something to protect, and you talked about blessings. So when you have your creative process with the straw, when you're weaving and knotting, and you're imbuing it with those blessings. So is it something like a mantra? Is it like a wishing spell of sorts? How would you recommend somebody just getting going would start out with the blessings and whatever they're making for their house, whether it's with a hagstone or a horseshoe or a corn dolly or a Rowan cross?
With the first charm was a song. Carmen, it means song. It means charm. And my friend called her daughter that, so many reasons I know. But people would sing, like with the knitting, the needles. They would actually do their charm as they were knitting. And when I'm plaiting, I'll actually talk to or I'll sing badly if nobody's listening, and you can charge it with intention and rhyming. Oh, I love rhyming. I'm terrible at it, but I love rhyming. That's why an awful lot of the old spells and charms were rhymed, so you'd remember it. It was rhythmic and it could be sung. And quite a few people, I was talking to someone recently that the people in the kitchen would often, instead of having a timer because they didn't have a watch, they would sing a song as they were stirring. And when the song was finished, the dish would be ready. So it would give you that kind of natural timing. I thought that was lovely. So if you have something that you want to make, you could hum, or you could sing, or you could say the words, or you could say a poem. I use my intention. I usually write it down, and then I'll repeat it as I'm plaiting, and that way I've got that imbued into it. Plus I bless it afterwards, which helps as well. We've got another one, haven't we? Oh, thank you. But yeah. I think it's lovely the beauty of it is that you can make it very, very personal. If you care about someone and you put love into something, that's imbued.
Absolutely. and yeah, recently he was talking with Patrick McManaway, and he was saying about singing, and if you sing to the elementals, you know, the earth or your home or whatever it is, like singing into your cooking when you're stirring the pot, whatever it is, he was saying how wonderfully it's received, and it's a bit like the elemental kingdom. It's their equivalent of us, how we feel when we hear bird song.
Yes, yes, very much
Us
so.
humans sing, it's the same as how delightful birdsong is to us. And whether or not we can hold a tune doesn't matter. It's the intention. And
Exactly. I dance with the wind elementals here. They come down in the storm, sadly, but we had 5 massive big old beech trees at the end of our lane at a crossroads.
wow.
And I went with Hecate, so crossroads are the place to be. And if it was windy, I'd often dance with the wind spirits. And I've had farmers kind of suddenly saying, "What are you doing?" Which is very embarrassing. But you know, the elementals want to dance, they want to sing. It makes, they really love us to communicate with them, just like when we send them love through our heart chakra. So we are so worried that somebody's going to see something, or possibly now phone us to perhaps record us. But I think it's really lovely. Children, I worked with children for 23 years over here in primary schools, and they have no qualms at all about doing this. They will sing, they will dance, and they're not on an island. Everybody sings, everyone plays the music, everyone dances. It's a very, very creative and musical place. And I was the first time I was ever working in a school. You didn't get trained, you just get thrown in there. And I had 35 little tiny children that couldn't tie their shoelaces, and I was told to get them to make corn dollies. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to die. And the nuns were very strict. Of course, I'm not a Catholic, so you imagine how popular I was there. And so I had all these little children, and it was just chaos, absolute chaos. And the nurse said, "I'll leave." Well, the nun said, "I'll leave you to it," and left. And I thought, "Oh no, I'm going to fail my first day." And I suddenly thought, "Okay." I said, "Can anyone sing a song?" Well, his hands went up, and they were pulling out fiddles. They were playing little tunes on their pipes. One after the other, stood up and did something. Every single little dot could do something, and I'm frantically running around doing this in the background. And so when she came back, they're going, "We finished." But if it was the children that saved my life that day, because they were just natural performers, telling stories, telling jokes. Every single one of them did something. They don't have the kind of the concerns that we do. We are worried about, oh, what will people think? I can't say hold a tune. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Magic is natural or intuitive, or blessing should be something we do naturally. So for me, I think it's whatever feels right to you and whichever you're comfortable with doing. And as long as you're sending good things as well, that's important. And we sing Arwens, we sing a lot of Arwens. We chant, and as I was saying to you earlier, we cascade Arwens, which is lovely when we're in a group.
And that reminds me, because we're in the Beltane season at the moment. Just recently, I heard about the very old, I think it's Middle English song, "Summer is a Comin' In," the Sing Cuckoo Sing song. And I only recently found out it's the same song as my favourite childhood programme, the Bagpuss programme, where the little mice.
My husband loves Bagpuss.
It's the same song that the mice were singing when they're washing and cleaning and everything. So, you know, it's just these lovely old folk songs, aren't there, that are just the folk memories, and they can be connected to a place, or, you know, a way of being, or a season. It's just so nice to bring that back in, and it fills the heart space, and it makes us all feel that wellspring of joy in us, you know. So yeah, it's really lovely remembering our own inner magical child as well. Like you've been spending time with the literal children, but we're all children inside, aren't we, somewhere?
Yeah, we're all little children. It's funny, there's a very good folklore podcast called The Three Ravens, if anyone's interested, which are 2 people, and they're amazing, and they do all the folklore of different counties in England. And they bring up a lot of the folk stories and songs and things. So if you're ever interested, The Three Ravens is a lovely one to listen to. Very entertaining. And especially if they talk about your county, you learn lots of strange things about the place you live, which I love. I don't live in England anymore, but I still find it fascinating. And they're just about to do Wales. So that'll be a new thing, but that's very worth it. But anyway, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Melanie. Oh, it's been really wonderful. And thank you to everyone who joined us. And I think we're ready now, Ali, for your beautiful closing blessing. Thank you.
Thank you. Kindly luminous beings, guardians of this Zoom space, we leave in love and peace, and thank you for your hospitality, blessings, and all your protections whilst we were in this Zoom space. And so let it be. Oh, sorry, it's my energy yawn.
It's all that protection you've been putting in. Thank you. You always do it so beautifully. Thank you. You are the luminous being I know.
Well, thank you again, everyone. So lovely to see you. And
Thank you, Linda.
thank you again, Melanie. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Bye. Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
For a fabulous talk.
Thank you, sweetie.
Very inspiring.
Go forth and be magical.